All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Meeting's already recording, so welcome to the August 21st edition of the CNAB weekly meeting. If we have any new folks, go ahead and introduce yourself now.
I'm Doug DePerry, Director of Product Security at Datadog, or Good Shashank.
Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, so the first item on the agenda is the CNAB 1.0 spec freeze. Who added this?
I added it, but just as a rolling
FYI.
update.
Okay. Yeah. I added a sub bullet on that to call out that there's been some issues opened as people have been working on tooling, and it'd probably be a good idea for everybody to go and review those. I don't know if we want to waste time now to walk through the issue queue. If there's interest in that, we can do it. Otherwise, when you have a chance after this meeting, go through there and see if there's anything that you think should be tackled. Bring it up in Slack and we can discuss it there. Next, we'll do a little bit about sorry. No coffee yet. We'll talk about cnab-go and Duffel. We've had some releases. We just merged the claim show PR, thanks to Leah and Urvashi for that. I had a question on that. Do we think that we're done with 747 now? Let me share my screen. We can see what that is. All right. So 747 was to implement output handling, and this was before we broke Duffel down into multiple repositories, cnab-go and Duffel. So there's really a couple things I think that go into implementing this, and we have specific issues in cnab-go now to add handling in the Docker, or sorry, in the runtime and Kubernetes drivers. Otherwise, the plumbing has been added to the driver interface. So we have it done in the Docker driver. We've now added handling in Duffel to get things out of that operation and store them in the claim. So the question here is, do we think that we're done implementing that in terms of Duffel? I think the rest of the pieces that are necessary to kind of fully flesh out output handling really fall to implementing those two last driver pieces, and those are in cnab-go, and we have discrete issues for those. So if you have any thoughts about closing this one out, let me know. Otherwise, today I'll just mark it closed, because I think that this last PR from Urvashi and Leah basically get everything that we need in terms of Duffel. Going once. All right. So next thing under that bullet, we have the Duffel 03.1 beta. So you can take a look at that. Is everybody pretty happy with the cadence of Duffel releases? Should we do more? Should we do less? I think there've been some really good rolling updates to things, and it's great to get those into the tool for people to use. Okay, and the last three things under this bullet kind of go together. We have a cnab-go 1.0 milestone and a Duffel 1.0 milestone. I'd like everybody to go take a look at those if you could after this meeting to see if there's anything that's missing or if there's anything that you don't think should be in that milestone. And then specifically, I wanted to talk about one of those. Inside of the Duffel 1.0 milestone, we have a couple of issues related to digest validation. That's something that hasn't really been implemented in Duffel yet. We've had a couple of starts on that throughout the kind of history of the project, and they've all kind of gotten partway there, and then we stopped for various reasons, largely because we disagreed on what digests were for a while, and then we aren't actually populating the bundle.json right now in Duffel. There's a couple of related things in the distribution spec related to, like, when do we get digests for invocation images? Does that happen when we do like a Duffel push? So right now that's not being populated. And since we're not really doing any hand editing of the Duffel or bundle.json file, we can go and add validation for digest right now, but there's nothing that's going to populate that into the bundle.json until we get probably to distribution. So I wanted to open it up for discussion to see what people thought. Is that something that we should have in what we call a 1.0 release of Duffel? Do we want that Duffel 1.0 release to be tied to just the CNAB core spec? in which case we could add the validation piece, but we won't have anything that populates that for actually building bundles with Duffel.
Just one quick note on that. There's an open PR on cnab-to-oci, which adds, if all the flags are passed by the consumer of the library, it will add the content digest for images after pushing to the registry. So there is a thing that adds the digest, but it's not in Duffel yet.
Right, but that'll be tied to Duffel push, or will that be a different command?
I don't know about the UX yet, but it essentially has to be tied by pushing the image to a registry. And Glenn, I think, has some thoughts about that, about persisting the digest. Glenn?
Yeah. The use case I was looking at was where you create a bundle, and then before you push the invocation image to done a Docker push of it, you export the bundle. And the issue you get into there is that you don't know the digest of the invocation image until it's been pushed to its registry. So that was, and I did look at possibly taking the image from the daemon, and that actually works at the moment, but there's no guarantee that it will continue to work. So it's not robust.
Right.
It seemed wrong to kind of push the images unconditionally when you build the bundle, but one option would be to push the invocation image unless you say no push of kind of development mode.
Yeah, we implemented that in Porter originally, and it was pretty irritating to do local kind of like that inner loop of development of the bundle, where every time you had to do a push. It's great if you have a decent internet connection, but it really sucks if you don't have a good internet connection.
Yeah, so if there's a flag to override that, then it gets you out of that hole.
So
can we maybe tie this to the security spec? Because that's what this is linked to, I guess. Because then maybe we can find a better solution without blocking the 1.0.
Yeah, so that was my question. Do we want to include the validation stuff in the 1.0 release, or should this go to the security or distribution releases?
In my opinion, at least, I think there should be a digest validation check at runtime that should be part of 1.0. Okay. I don't think we should be prescriptive of what tool or which entity should populate the digest, but we should check it at runtime.
So if the digest is populated, we should check it at runtime.
Yeah.
And it potentially even have defaults to fail if there is no digest for production runtimes.
I agree with that that approach. If the digest is there, we should check it.
I don't think this is Ralph. I'm sorry, I'm joining just late. It doesn't sound to me like we need to. Should we be prescriptive about failure, or should we be prescriptive for 1.0 just to say should, must check it if it's present, can fail?
I think we should kick off an issue then and discuss the various outputs.
Okay.
But I certainly agree with the other part, which is we should probably defer when those digests get populated, because we then get into the registry side of things.
Yep.
Specifically in the current iteration of cnab-to-oci, there's a flag where you can skip adding the digest if you don't want to modify the bundle at all. If you do want to add it, then it's going to modify your current bundle and then push it. But there's a possibility where you don't want to modify your bundle at all for various reasons. For example, persisting the digest of the bundle itself.
Okay, I'll open an issue in the Duffel repo to. Oh.
Should the validation be in Duffel or?
Oh, sorry, in cnab-go.
In cnab-go, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
I just briefly looked at the spec, and I don't think it's actually clear in the spec that that's a requirement of a runtime. I think it says, like, if it's omitted, then runtimes are not required to validate, but I don't think it says the inverse of that, which is to say if it is there, then runtimes are required to validate.
Although the double negative there is kind of fun.
just saying, like, I don't think there's anything in the spec that requires a runtime to validate a digest at the moment.
So I guess the question is, do we want that? So maybe we should open an issue there too, just to discuss, just to make sure that the people who aren't here get a say.
Okay, so two issues, one in cnab-go, one in the spec, to allow discussion. Sound good? Okay, so that wraps up the topic I had added. I think the next one was distribution. Was that you, Radu?
Yeah, I also added that, but Sylvan, do you want to talk about what we've done with cnab-to-oci currently?
As you wish. Okay, so we worked with Radu on cnab-to-oci, and we modified the way we store the bundle.json inside the registry. So now we store the full bundle as a canonical version instead of storing a subset of it and trying to reconstruct it on the fly while pulling it. So now registries can maybe fetch it and interpret it if they want. And we did that using the relocation map. So now we generate the relocation map during the pull. It's just a mapping between the digested reference we created while pushing or mounting the image service images and invocation images. And it's a mapping between that and the service images described in the bundle.json.
Just check that, understood that properly. So if you've got an image out on Docker Hub or somewhere, and then you push this bundle to your registry, the image will be copied to the repository, same repository as a bundle. Yep. Which is the key in the relocation map, which reference?
It will be your target registry where you pushed it.
Okay. So that means that if we've got Kubernetes YAML files, for example, inside the bundle that refer to the original image reference, then the relocation map doesn't allow us to fix those up because it won't have those in the keys. It will have the pushed.
I think I'm looking at the relocation map right now, Sylvan, and I think the key of the relocation map is the original image.
Yeah, yes. Oh, sorry. The key. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. The
Please.
key.
Okay.
Yeah. And the value is, yes, the pushed image. Sorry.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Hi guys, sorry, I just have two questions to clarify my own thinking, my understanding here. The first is, how is the bundle being kept on the OCI registry? That alone to me is interesting. I thought it was only officially supposed to keep images. So I'm just curious how you guys did it. I think it's great. The second thing is, so the relocation map does not rewrite a new bundle.json, right? Just wanted to make sure.
The entire, oh, go ahead, Chris, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. So we built a tool called cnab-to-oci, which pushes the images referenced in the bundle and the invocation image, and then as an object as well, a blob, it pushes the bundle.json. And we store that as an OCI index. So this comes from people we didn't want to reinvent the wheel and build ourselves a new registry like the hub. It turns out it's really a pain to manage and maintain. So reusing that was what we wanted to do. So we took the OCI primitives and just put things in there in a logical way, and that worked. Sorry, Radu. And for question 2, the entire bundle.json is now stored without any modification.
Okay, great. Thanks. So I need to look. I know people have discussed OCI index before. I need to take a look at it. That's interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, there was also a proposal on the spec from Seymour for the on-disk representation to be an OCI image layout. So this way, once again, we're not reinventing the wheel. We also know that the tough stuff and Intoto works with the existing container stuff, so we can just take those same concepts and apply them to applications.
Cool, that's very cool. So if I understand correctly, what you're saying is you can use the one server to host everything, all the metadata, the bundle.json, and the images. That's pretty sweet.
Yes, and more importantly, it's not owned by my team.
Okay, I think there was one more topic under there. When to push to get image digests for thick bundles.
That was the same discussion as what do I do if I don't want to push the images, I just want to export them. So this is covered by the same discussion.
Okay. And then the last thing is cnab Security Specification.
About the security spec, we started having another meeting about the registry and security specs, which is every other week than that. And we've had the first one kind of a short notice, sorry about that, last week. And we chatted a bit about the security spec. And Tushank has a PR on the specification that introduces an initial document. Do you want to talk about that PR, Tushank?
Yes, I should emphasize first of all that maybe I should post, someone could help me out by posting the link to the PR in the chat. That'd be great so that everyone else can see. Sorry, I'm not on the chat right now. I should emphasize that the PR is still very heavily a work in progress, right? Because it's based on my understanding of what's going on, how we're willing to do things. And I talked a lot with Radu last week, and now, even from this discussion. So conceptually, the idea is very simple. We just add a layer of tough metadata and in-toto metadata about images and bundles, right? And the thinking is that I didn't want to tie anyone to using one server for everything. If they wanted to use two servers, one for the metadata, one for the images and bundles. That's how I wrote the spec. But I think since we are in the understanding that we want to use the one OCI registry for everything, that would make things operationally much simpler. The reason why I separated the two is because Docker Content Trust, which is a version of Tough, right now requires you to run two different servers. And there's no real reason to do this, right? Other than it's a quirk of their implementation. So that's the way I designed it, so that if people want to use Dockery and Notary, they can use a different server to host the metadata if they wanted to. I think Radu's managed to make everything work on a single registry, which I'm not quite sure how he did it, but that's amazing. So that's good news. The second thing is that one of the most important pieces of information, I think, in the PR is that the idea of gradual security. So just to recapitulate the idea for everyone, in-toto is the thing that basically tells you how your images were built. Which developer signed the source code, which CI/CD step signed the build, the package, the container, which CI/CD step signed the image, right? And all of that good stuff. And Tough, you can think of it as the secure transport layer that distributes everything. The in-toto rules for the pipeline, who is supposed to do what, and all of your containers and all of that good stuff. Does this roughly make sense to everybody? Great. And so you don't want to, I didn't want to require everyone to sign their bundles and images right away using both Tough and in-toto. That's too much. That's what I call level 4. And so I have ideas of different levels of security. Right now, I guess we're all in level 0. Level 1 security would add Tough metadata to bundles. And then level 2, that would tell you that your bundles were not tampered with, but it doesn't tell you how your bundles were generated, right? Level 2 would be giving you more assurance. You add in-toto to how you produce your bundles. Then level 3, you start using Tough to sign your images to, and level 4 is like the heaviest security of them all, where, you know, maybe after a year's worth of work, you've turned on full blast level 4. That's the rough breakdown of the PR so far. And so far, I've gotten a lot of very good feedback from people, especially Radu, who actually seems to have a working implementation for both Duffel and Toto so far for pushing a bundle. So that's really interesting. He's pushed a separate markdown document that he shared with everyone in the CNAB channel that I want to take a deeper look at. Look at that. Yeah, thanks for the link. That document, my document is very conceptual, right? It tells you how to do things, but not the low-level details. This document is how to actually concretely do everything. And I'm going to work with him later today to figure out all the details. That's it from me. Does anyone have questions?
I can walk very high level over that document and talk about how things are supposed to be stored. Just one correction to your mention right now. I'm using an OCI registry to store the bundle, essentially using cnab-to-oci, and one separate TUF repository to push all the metadata. So
got it.
There's a single TUF collection for TUF metadata and in toto metadata. And I can show a demo.
Okay, sounds good.
I guess the statement was made earlier about why you might want to put the metadata on a separate registry. And I don't think it's a valid concern, but the concern that will be raised is, well, what if the registry gets compromised? Isn't it better to have the metadata on a separate registry? So what's our answer to that?
Oh, I see. Really, it doesn't matter. It's more about, you know, how you want to manage things. It's a good question, Glenn. So it doesn't matter whether you keep them separate or not, because the metadata is signed using keys that are not on the registry.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So really, even if you try to tamper with the images or the metadata themselves, you will be caught unless you have the keys.
Yeah, makes sense.
This is Ralph here. Just one question. I'm sort of going to extend the same question. I can imagine a large 3-letter organization talking to me and wanting metadata, for example, to be on a separate server that is either on-prem or in a secured network, otherwise, you know, completely separated. I'm assuming the same response addresses that kind of question, which is slightly different than just 2 servers. It's actually physical locations being different. I'm assuming the same responses are our answer there.
Yes, exactly. One good way to think about it is like, you know, the way Linux distributions use mirrors, and it's not a concern because the original distribution is the one that signs all of the metadata and packages. So you ideally, you shouldn't care where you download everything from, because they don't have, for example, Debian's GPG signing key. In this case, we replace GPG with Duffel and Toto. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's actually a good way of phrasing it for a lot of people, I imagine.
Great.
Then I can, I recommend you read the document. It has a lot of links to all of the specifications that we talk about. And I try to make it as clear as possible what metadata we're using and how we're using it, and eventually link towards where that metadata is described. But in theory, there are 2 types of data that we use, which is the content digest of the bundle itself, can be a thick or a thin bundle, and attestation data that is generated by in toto. That is just files that attest that a certain entity, a functionary, executed something on top of something along the process of building the bundle. And this sort of high level explains which step in the CI process generates what type of data. And the second part, which describes how we distribute that. And essentially, we are trying to use a single TUF collection, which stores both the bundle signature and all of the in toto metadata for a certain bundle. This tries to be as flexible as possible, allowing people to use to point to where other tough collections where provenance or signatures for other components are. But if needed, there can be a single one that is actually used. And I have a demo which uses a single one. It uses the public Docker Notary implementation, and it takes a bundle JSON and it just tries to, first of all, add all the links that I have generated locally that have been generated by a CI system, by a process. It then takes the bundle signature and pushes it to the same collection, then reads the bundle and pushes all the images and invocation images to an OCI registry, in this case to Docker Hub. And then I can, either on the same machine or on a different machine, can execute the process of verifying that, and then so this is going to do the reverse process. It is going to look in the tough collection that I passed. It's going to try to pull the signature of the bundle. Then it pulls the bundle itself from the OCI registry. It computes its content digest. If it doesn't match, it's going to exit. It's going to error out. If the bundles match, then it's going to pull all the in total metadata. It's going to write it into it is going to write it and then perform the in total verification. Right here, I'm doing the in total verification in a container. Think about it the same way as an invocation image. This is a verification image, mainly because the client installer might not have the requirements needed for in total verify to run, but right now this doesn't really matter. And then it's going to perform whatever process was described by the in total layout. Are there any questions to how that works or why it worked in a certain way? Just to be clear, that's a rough first draft. The document really needs a lot of feedback, and that's just a very rough first implementation.
I can never resist asking questions. Somebody tell me to shut up if it's too much. But is the bundle compressed on the repository?
I don't know how that starts. Sylvain?
I don't think so.
Okay, right. Just my concern was what type of digest. If we have a digest of the uncompressed bundle and then we compress it, then you can have a decompression bomb when you download it before you've checked the digest and that kind of thing.
That's an excellent question, because we had thought about this in Duff before. We used to also include the hashes of compressed versions, but then that raised a lot of questions like what compression algorithms do we use? Do we force people to compress? So we kind of left it out of the spec. It's now completely up to you. So for example, the server can transparently send you compressed bundles anyway, right? Using HTTP, which lets you compress things on the fly. But the digest for now is by default. Nothing prevents you from including the digest for a compressed version, but that's implementation specific. So you can say, here's the digest for bundle.json.gz. We don't prevent you.
Yeah, I mean, thin bundles are quite small, so I don't think there's any need to compress them.
Right. It's a valid question about zip bombs. But
yeah, thanks a lot for raising that.
That is a good point for thick bundles, because those will be likely scenarios that are more users will be interested in understanding exactly how and what they are when they're thick bundles, likely.
So just taking a step back, the process that I just showed could very well apply to thick bundles as well. The question is, where are you pulling the thick bundle from? Right now, the demo just uses an OCI registry because we're mostly using thin bundles and OCI registries. The question would be, if you had a thick bundle, first of all, where would be the metadata repo, and where would you get the thick bundle from? I'm not saying that's not a valid issue, but the process works for thick bundles as well. It just doesn't take into account where you take it from. Right now, it just pulls it from an OCI registry.
Yeah, exactly. If I could just add to that, I wanted to say that the way I wanted to resolve this issue in my document was to say that the verification process for a thin bundle should be exactly the same as it is for a thick bundle. So locally, you can imagine the function always verifies, the verification function always verifies a thick bundle. So what the runtime has to do to verify a thin bundle is to build locally a thick bundle first. Get everything, slap it into one giant tarball, and then call the function with the verification thing. That's to make the implementation simpler, so it doesn't have to worry about the download part, just the verification part. Does that make sense? Of course, I mean, how you implement it is up to you guys. Personally, if I had to implement, that's how I would do it, but that's just an implementation thing. Sorry, Radu, if I could ask you one more clarification question. This is basically level 2 security, right? We're signing bundles, not images. And we're signing in toto metadata because we want provenance. We want signed provenance for who and how the bundle was generated. And we're using Duff to make sure that everything was in. So a nice analogy is, in toto is the thing that tells you which supply on the drug bottle was produced by whom. And Duff is like the plastic layer of hologram, sealed hologram.
So you're partially right in there. So right now, how we're using the Duff collection is we're using the targets part of the collection to store bundle signature. And then we're using the custom field in the Duff collection to store, and here there are a couple of options. So you could have bundle metadata, bundle provenance, and under there, you can have all of the in toto files associated either with just the bundle itself, how the CNAB bundle and invocation image got built. But there's nothing stopping you from having only one set of in toto metadata. So if your CI is building all the components of the bundle and you have all of them available, the document that I linked has a way of saying that this part of metadata is supposed to be checked for a particular image. There's a place in there for a map that has the key, all of the images, and then as values in total metadata for the specific image. And then the second option in there is also to have a map that points to another Duff collection where there's in total metadata for a specific image. Does that make sense?
I think so. I think I roughly understand. I'd love to have a separate phone call with you later to discuss the details. I think, and I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong here, I think for the purpose of this meeting, which is to try to finalize CNAB 1.0, I think it's important to say that this security spec is far from ready, and I don't think we should block CNAB spec 1.0 for this.
I agree, but I do have one question. I actually have two questions.
Okay.
One of them is more security related. Yeah. Where should we store the signing keys for the root layouts? I've had
excellent. Yeah, I saw that was the thing. So this is the limitation with Notary right now, right? It's able to do. So here's what I recommend. You use a delegation from the top level targets key, right? And you say to the delegation, I'm going to delegate signing all bundle JSON and in toto link metadata to this machine step, for example. Make sense? But the key used to verify the in toto root layout, that should be signed using offline keys by the targets role. You see what I'm saying? So there's two different kinds of signing, two different kinds of information. The real root of trust should be signed by the offline top level targets role. And really everything else should be signed, so including the root layout public key as you asked. And then there should be a delegation to I don't sign everything else. That's signed by a different delegated role. But Notary doesn't let you do that right now, I think. It lets you do delegate all or nothing to one other role. Either target signs have everything, or target/releases signs everything, which is not ideal.
Okay, so in the current, if you go to the in toto demo right now,
yeah,
in the demo directory, there is a public key included that was used to sign the root layout.
Uh-huh.
And does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, right now in the way I built the demo, in the way I built the signing process, I just include the public key that was used to sign the layout
I
in the
understand.
custom metadata.
Yeah, I understand.
Is that something that we could go forward with?
We can, but who signs the custom metadata? Because if it's signed by machine, it can always switch to a completely different bogus set of malicious in total metadata, and you wouldn't see the difference. You see? Make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I think the delegation that you mentioned could solve the problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
But right now, I think. Sorry.
Let's take this offline, just not to hold the entire meeting about this.
Right. That's definitely. But I think Ralph said something. He's right that we should call it out specifically for now. And I think Radu has. He does mention it in the document.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. And I have one more question. So right now, to perform in toto verification process, you need to have an in toto implementation on your machine, on the client machine. And the reference implementation of in toto, first of all, requires Python. There's another one in Go that can be used. My main question is, performing the verification could possibly require various software to be available whenever the verification is done. The example that I have uses tar. It has to untar something to verify that the digest matches. I've been playing around with the idea of running the verifications inside a container, and I've been chatting with Justin Cormack and Trishank, and apparently they see no issues running the verification inside a container. So in the same way that we're using an invocation image to run the CNAB process, we would use a verification image to do in toto verify and not have to have anything configured on the machine that's running the process. The main question that I have right now is, for that to work, we would need at least one piece of data in the bundle that mentions what container image should be used for the verification. My question is, where should we store that? We have a custom object in bundle JSON. We could potentially store it there, or do people have other ideas on where that would be stored? We could have a well-known field in custom, but I just wanted to make sure.
You don't want to add a top-level field because it'll change the spec?
Yeah, that's why I wouldn't want to add a top-level field.
We could consider saying in the spec that if it is an unknown field, you should ignore it. Or we could add some placeholders, maybe. I don't know if that makes sense. Or if we really just don't want to tackle, we don't want to add anything right now.
The main reason I don't want to add it is because we already have the custom field, and that's what we're using that for. I would be reluctant adding a top-level field so late in the process for 1.0, honestly.
It's like annotations for images, just put them in there.
Yeah, I need to think about the security implications of where we put it too, right? Because who's signing that? Basically, it's saying, and the question to think about is whether anyone can play a switcheroo game with that too. Because if you trust a machine to tell you which verification image to use, it can pull a different one on you. So you're right. We definitely need to think through this, and it's we don't want to change CNAB 1.0 right now without before.
I was thinking that we can provide the same level of information for the verification image that we provide for invocation and other images, and potentially provide. If implementators want, can provide attestation data and signature for the verification image. We can treat it basically like any other component in your system.
Yeah, and we will also need to sign the invocation image the same way we sign the public keys for the root layout. They're equally important.
Couldn't we just rely on image signatures for that part?
I'm thinking maybe, but just off the top of my head, to be paranoid, that's what I'm thinking. You might be right that something more relaxed might work. Maybe just signing the public keys for the root layout might work. But this is my off the top of my head guess. We'll need to discuss this.
Thanks a lot.
You've both been speaking to Justin Cormack as well?
Yeah. He's been reviewing the document this week. His main issue was prescribing where to store the public keys used to sign the root layout.
Great job on the demo, Radu. I mean, that's really exciting. I have no idea how you make so much progress in so little time.
I had some fun on the weekend.
He doesn't sleep either. No sleep. Yep, Ralph was right.
So as you go through the document, and if you have any questions about how we're using metadata or why we're using certain piece of metadata, feel free to ask in the channel. I'm more than happy to talk about it. And really thanks to Trishank for talking through with me through all of this last week. He's been really helpful.
No, thank you.
No, that's great. It's wonderful to see.
I think that brings us to the end of the agenda. Does anybody have anything they want to add or bring up before we adjourn?
We just released cnab-to-oci. And we are waiting for the relocation map here to be merged to release a second, another one. But it may take some time.
Excellent. Any PRs that people need review on that we can discuss now, or we can adjourn? All right. Well, thanks for the meeting today. Everybody have a great day.
Sweet. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you later, Radu.
Great stuff.